Welcome again to Naked Insider. I'm the host, and my name is Boaz Fischer, and we have
Peter Natterer.
Good to have you back.
It's great to be here.
Today's discussion is stress. What is it, and what's the breaking point?
Very important.
Very important. So let's start defining what is stress.
Stress can be divided into two groups, which is good stress, which is what gets us out of bed in the morning and makes us motivated to do stuff, and bad stress, which is what actually ends up demotivating us because we've got too much on our plate. I guess that's probably the layman's way of looking at it.
Good. So why does it happen?
I think there is an amount of creep that happens where people take on more and more. I mean, there's a saying, you know, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And while that person is motivated and flying, they can most certainly handle it. But at some point in time, their plate is going to be full. Yeah,
and it's interesting to know that people react to stress differently.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So what are the typical symptoms that you see regarding stress?
So the most typical symptom that I see is that people become short, curt, almost harried is the word that springs to mind. They're always busy and they're always frenetic in one way or another. But there are other types as well too. One that I like to nickname the submarine.
Okay, submarine.
And the submarine is when somebody goes very quiet. It's like they go under.
Oh, okay, yes.
And the problem with that is you never know when the next torpedo is coming from.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a question. So how easy is it for employees to sort of identify, oh, this is a person who's going through stress?
It's much easier for an external person to realise than for the person who's actually experiencing it, because there is almost I can do this hero attitude for the person who's piling on more and more. They want to be known as a person who's the go-to person, the one who gets things done.
Yep.
But oftentimes they're way past their boundary before they actually say, "Hey, I've got a problem here."
Yeah. So how does work environment contribute to sort of stressful situations at work?
So most work environments work to deadlines, and most deadlines are thrown out almost automatically because this is just the process of doing business. And what happens is that a lot of times that people who are competent tend to get more thrown at them, because it's like, you know, this guy always gets these things done, or this gal always gets these things done, so just give it to Joe.
Correct.
And at one point in time, Joe's going to actually have an overload of stuff. So that's one thing. I mean, there's also other things as well too. You can have customer stress. You can have financial stress. That could be internal from the organisation, or that could be external to the family situation.
Yep.
You can have bullying.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, because that you know, the internal pressure, or you know, having to work with people you don't like working with,
and also I've noticed that there's also a bit of a tall poppy syndrome that goes on as well too. If somebody's really competent,
yes,
other people kind of take little side swipes.
Yes,
yeah,
and it's also another form of criticism.
Correct.
On the side.
Yeah.
Okay. What about underperformance? Because there's a sort of an inherent that if you, for example, a salesperson and they've got quarterly targets, for example, and realizing that they're not meeting the performance targets, there is that stress as well.
Yeah. Actually, a really interesting analogy there is inside of a tennis game. I don't play tennis, but if you are, there you go. So you'll relate to what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So if you are under the pump, this is the set match.
Yes.
This is the winning point.
Yes.
And you've internally assessed that you're not doing too good in this game as you should be.
Yes.
Now you're under stress to actually make that serve or that shot count.
Correct.
Chances are the more you are stressed, the less you're going to achieve it.
Correct. And it's interesting, even other sports like golf.
Spot on.
Great classic examples. What are I was going to say 5 negative effects of stress on the workplace? And it could be more than 5, but I just thought.
So lack of concentration, the mind is elsewhere. Inattention to detail, and that could be either deliberate by way of shortcuts, or it could also be like, oh my God, I just didn't do that.
Yes.
Oh, I forgot to do that. Or not even realising that you've done something and skipped a step in the process, that sort of thing. You can, and that can have financial loss on the organisation. But then all of a sudden, you also start finding that the person is not feeling well. You've got increased sick times.
Yes.
If the person is totally overwhelmed, they go, "That's it, I'm leaving."
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question: is stress leading to also potentially low morale?
Absolutely. If we don't feel that we are able to deliver what we've promised to deliver, that will cascade us into a lower morale.
Yeah.
The funny thing about lower morale is it actually is contagious.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yes, because once you have a maybe it's the wrong set of words, but just so once you have, let's say, a rotten apple, or that infests.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But the
I'm
good
not
news
saying
is
an employee is a rotten person, but
but the good news is that a positive and can-do attitude is also as contagious.
Correct.
So I think from a managerial perspective, it's a really good tool to be able to say, okay, let's turn this around. Let's give some positive morale, and that can actually make the whole team much more effective.
Correct. And I was going to say, so another area is turnover. So high turnover can also be self-perpetuating.
Yes.
So if you have a high turnover, then other people or the other employees are sort of questioning what's going on.
Yep.
And that creates its own stress.
Yes. And look, the organisation's become getting a reputation. There's a saying called churn and burn. You churn through people and you burn them, and you churn through people. And once an organisation gets a reputation like that, the people who are still in the organisation actually pick up on that really quick.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you work for so-and-so.
Yes, yes, exactly. So the next question I wanted to ask is, what are the factors influencing work stress? So, for example, culture. So if you've got toxic culture
will always do it.
And we've talked about it quite often.
Yeah. So let's look at toxic culture for instance. There is a lack of emotional intelligence inside of a toxic culture. People will do something to, for want of a better word, make themselves feel better at the expense of other people. What we're looking at inside of a team is we want to be able to have the emotional intelligence to be able to support our team.
Yes.
So that the team becomes the unit, which then becomes the deliverable.
Correct.
So toxic toxic workplace environment will cascade that down really quickly.
Correct. Bad management.
Bad management? Yes. I've seen a number of organisations where the hand is not on the steering wheel, and the organisation decides to take itself off on different tangents.
Oh yes.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, team's not happy.
Role conflict.
Yeah.
Don't you love that one?
Role conflict, absolutely. What am I supposed to be doing here?
Yes. Another great one is also relationship at work. So you could have peers that you just don't get on with.
Correct. Yeah. And again, that gets back into the toxic kind of environment, because you can have peers that don't necessarily get on with each other but are professional enough to keep it together.
Yes, correct.
Then you also have peers where one might have some perceived sense of seniority or superiority, where they constantly throw little pot shots from behind the corner.
Oh, don't you love that?
Yeah. Well,
innuendos and things like that.
Yes.
Or gossips.
Yes. Yes.
Say no more.
Correct.
All right, so let's look at sort of the overarching risk to the organization when stress is high and it's pervasive.
So there's definitely a risk to the organisation in terms of structures not being followed, which can have implications on security, which can have implications on monetary side of things, which can have implications on other people, other employees deciding they've had enough of this business and decide they want to leave. Customers being dissatisfied. If you have a culture within the organisation of being rude with each other, that will bleed out into customers.
Correct.
And you potentially losing customers that way as well.
That is a bit of a disaster, should I say?
Yeah.
So let me ask you the question, which is what this video is all about. So how does a manager identify when an employee is at their breaking point?
the telltale signs are that people who have been previously enthusiastic to take on a new task or project become increasingly reluctant to take those on.
Yes.
They may have a hesitation. They may also become distracted. So their enthusiasm starts to wane because in their own internals, they're saying, well, I've got to do this now on top of all these other things that I've got to do.
Yes.
So I'll say yes, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to manage that, and there is the stress.
Correct. Is there, I mean, this is a side question because people tend to compare. So if, for example, you're the manager of the person who's given that project forwards, you say, well, I can handle it, so why can't this person do it?
Correct, yes.
And yet you're getting a response, I can't handle it.
Yep. And yes,
it could be. What I'm trying to say, there's a conflict here of expectations.
There is, and sometimes it's also a conflict of understanding the intricacies of the task at hand. So somebody who's saying we need to do project X, and to that person it's pretty straightforward. We need to go from A to B. The person that needs to implement that goes, wait a minute, there's about 16 steps in the middle.
Yes, correct.
And each of those is a task in its own right.
Yes, yes, yes.
And there is a difference of perception of what's required to make that task occur. Yes. And I think one of the worst words that I've heard in management is, "Oh, just do this,
just do that." Yeah.
Because it kind of dismisses the fact that there is a whole process and steps that need to be involved to make that happen.
Yeah. So last, what is the key takeaway?
The key takeaway is that your stress is good.
Stress is good. To a certain level,
stress is good.
Stress is good.
Too much stress is bad. Yes. And the reality is that there are many people in your organisation, as for instance, in what I could almost call in a functional stressor situation. They're just keeping it together. They're managing to do their job, but give them one more task. It's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. You remember that game?
Yes. Yes, indeed.
So, the key task, the key takeaway is to have the emotional intelligence to look at the people, especially key people that you rely on, to make sure that you don't put that last straw on them. Yes. Because that means that not just that project, but all the other ones that they've got carriage on are in jeopardy.
Exactly. So there you have it. A great discussion about stress and managing stress.
I'm stressed now.
Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the next video, which should be really interesting, which is a step in the right direction, is all about anxiety.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
Look forward to it.
Cheers.